we did a study recently that shows about 25% of all construction stores, grocery stores, coffee shops, any of these companies that we go to and use every single day are conglomerates. They're really big companies. And so the idea with entrepreneurship is we're trying to push this idea of, get some ownership. Stop being a nation full of renters and move to a nation of owners and have ownership in the small businesses around you. So that's why I push entrepreneurship, not because I don't think we're all sadists who do it and masochists who do it, because it's definitely a hard thing, as you well know.
So let's talk about entrepreneurship. That's what I want to talk about. And why do you care, and what are you into? Like, I want to hear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was actually just talking about this last night, but I think that it's a tragedy that, for instance, we did a study recently that shows about 25% of all construction stores, grocery stores, coffee shops, any of these companies that we go to and use every single day are conglomerates. They're really big companies. And so the idea with entrepreneurship is we're trying to push this idea of, get some ownership. Stop being a nation full of renters and move to a nation of owners and have ownership in the small businesses around you. So that's why I push entrepreneurship, not because I don't think we're all sadists who do it and masochists who do it, because it's definitely a hard thing, as you well know.
Yeah, but it's a thing. Like, yeah. You're confident that we can push through. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
100%. I mean, we're not curing cancer here or going to the moon. We're opening up a local neighborhood store or taking over somebody's laundromat or running, a new 21st century version of a formerly traditional business. So this is all doable. It's simple, but it's not easy. And I think the really important part about entrepreneurship today is we've glorified the Silicon Valley type of entrepreneurship, which is, okay, you got to create some big social app and have it go super viral. And that's how people care that you've created something. And I think that is so shallow, doesn't actually further much of humanity. And it's much easier to have an impact actually in your local community than it is to have 5 million downloads on the newest gas app or TikTok app, which at the end of the day, obviously changes culture in the world at large, but I'm not sure it's always for the better.
But why do you care?
Well, I guess multiple reasons, but like, do you want to go to a Starbucks every day? Do you want to shop at Walmart all the time?
Don't ever go to Starbucks.
I love that. I knew I liked you. Yeah, I'm the same. I make a point of trying to shop local every single time I can. And if I ever go to a coffee shop, it's always going to be something that's around the corner that I've never heard before. If I'm in a new city or my favorite one in my city. And so why I care is because I don't want to live in a world that looks like an expanded strip mall or, off a highway gas stop where there's more billboards of McDonald's than they are like the small neighborhood store. So I actually think it really matters. And so I think that from a sort of a philosophical standpoint. And at some point, if you make any money, to a certain degree, you start realizing like money's great. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with a ton more of it. Like, I guess you could buy the jets and the yachts and all that. But the more interesting part to me is that, I wake up every day sort of focused on something that I think matters. And maybe I could have some impact on that thing that matters besides my ego. And so that's why I care. I don't want to live in a world of strip malls. And I actually think the most interesting thing is finding other builders and talking to them. That's why I like to do podcasts like this. I'd much rather do this than be in finance, building spreadsheets anymore.
Okay. So let's get into your background a little bit, because we're going to have to get real for a moment.
Yeah, 100%.
So, like, you're going to have to tell me why it matters to you.
Yeah.
And so give me some of your background, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, I've been in finance for a long time. I think it's 15 years now. So I started out pretty traditionally. I went to a rotational development program in a company called Vanguard. saw a bunch of different sectors inside of finance, then went to Goldman for a couple of years. That was during the financial crisis. Super interesting time to work there. Decided I didn't want to stay at Goldman anymore.
What year was that? So just so I know.
2008 and 9.
Yeah.
So right in the middle of it.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So they were, firing 20% of the workforce sort of left and right, and not doing very many deals. I wanted to be on the investment banking side, but investment banking wasn't doing much. So I didn't really have a path there. Ended up going to private equity, commingled product sales, and then went into sort of our asset management group. I left there, went to State Street, another big company, obviously in finance. Ended up doing short-term fixed income investments, and then started building out their Latin America institutional business. Left that for a smaller company called First Trust, and built up their Latin American investment business, a couple $2 billion in assets under management. I built and headed that business. And then I left after we got, I don't remember when that was, 2013, maybe 2000, something like that, 14. And then I went to a company in the cannabis private equity space, built 2 funds with them, invested those 2 funds, and then started doing my own deal. And so almost all of it's been in finance. And then I've invested in a bunch of boring businesses along the way, those little mom and pops that I kind of talk about all the time.
Yeah, I like the boring business side of your idea. Like, what are you talking about? I like it because I think the same way. Like, most of the economy is run by mom and pops.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, 50% of people work for small businesses.
Yeah.
Increasingly we give more money to big businesses, but I would say, the way you touch most businesses is small businesses. And so I didn't do it out of altruism to start, to be frank. I did it because I was tired of working for the man. And I've never been a very good employee. I'm pretty unemployable.
Who's the man?
Well, I think so. When I first, actually, I've always been like that, every single job. I think I usually can only last, my longest stint at any company was 5 years, 5.5, 6. And then I did, stints of 2 or 3 years at lots of different places. But, I just didn't really want to work for somebody else. And so I started buying these businesses because they cash flow and they're simple to run for the most part, and they don't cost you that much. So I didn't do it from like a perspective of this is better for society. I was like, this is better for Codie. And then once I started getting into it more, I was like, oh, there's something else going on here that I hadn't even thought about. But yeah, the man was just like any boss ever, basically.
Yeah. And what's wrong with having a boss?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think some humans love to be part of a team and have somebody else in charge. It's actually like, again, kind of like I was talking about, it's a brutal, awful thing running your own business at some point, because you'll have some moment where like you can't pay payroll, on Friday, and you're going to have to figure that out or tell other people. Or today I had 2 friends text me, they're going through massive layoffs today, so they can't do a meeting we had. So it's really hard to be an owner, but there are some humans, I think, that just are not good employees. And I'm one of them, because I really want to do it the way that I think that you should run a business. And especially at these big financial conglomerates, they were like, we just don't do it that way. It's fine if you think it's more efficient, but it's not going to happen. And so, at some point it's like you get sort of an FU tolerance, and mine just, I burst through it and was like, I gotta do this my own way. But I'm not sure it's better. It just is what it is,
Yeah. Well, I have a hat that I made. It's a red hat that says SLOKS on it. That's Spanish for it is what it is.
Oh, SLOKS. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, it's real. And that's what I think. And I that's my political position also. Like, let's just do this shit.
Yeah, it is what it is. I think it's probably a healthier way to live. Don't upset. Don't obsess.
All right, so how do you get there? How do you get there?
What do you mean by there?
Like you're vibrant and you have an idea and you're trying to do something. Like, what does it mean to you? Like, I want to know where it comes from for you.
I think for most of us, probably it starts in our childhood. Mine would be with my dad. I grew up in Arizona, And in Arizona, at least back then, I think it's still a little bit the same, as a bit of the Wild West. So I grew up like hunting and hiking around and shooting guns and out in the wilderness more than not, or playing a lot of sports, group sports. And, I give my dad a lot of credit because he always ran his own small businesses. He would have never called himself an entrepreneur or a founder. He would have just said, I run this business or that business, which I respect. But he was pretty big on this idea of, it's fun to work. There's like a labor that we love as humans. We are these like producers, and we don't do well by sitting around. Actually, that makes us like miserable and feel like we have a lack of purpose. And so I think he's the main reason why I like to work as much as I do. He's the exact same way. If you hang out with the two of us, we're probably not going to be sitting around watching TV. We're going to be talking about like, what's working for you. And he runs a business now in real estate. And so I like to talk to him about, how are you structuring this deal? Or why do you do that? Or this is happening with me. How would you handle it? And that's sort of like, business terms are our love language. And so he's the reason why I do as much in business as I do. And then I got to give my mother credit too, because she always says I don't, but she was a 30-year special education teacher. And so if I teach my kids one thing, it will be that they have to like learn to love learning in some way, shape, or form. I'm agnostic as to how. For me, it was, I loved fiction books, and I would just power through them like crazy. And then I ended up going to nonfiction and pushing through beyond that. But she instilled in me a real love of learning. And that's half the game if you're doing business, I think.
Yeah. Do you like words?
Oh yeah, I do. You must too. Written a bunch of books, filmmaker.
Yeah, that's what I do.
You play
It's
with
hard.
words.
It's hard to love words because
Yeah.
really nobody cares.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah,
I
really is the truth.
Have you ever read this guy by the name of Jonah Goldberg? He's with a group called The Dispatch. They're political, but
Yeah, I know those guys. Yeah,
okay.
I do know those guys, but I'm not really. Like, I spend most of my time not trying to be political.
Agree. So he has this thing called
care. I don't want to be.
Es lo que es, right?
Yeah.
He has this article though that I love every week. It's called the J file, I believe. And he is, I don't remember what it's called when you're obsessed with words, but if there is one human being who is categorically obsessed with the human language and figuring out interesting words and how to express them, it's Jonah. And I think there are very few others who appreciate, being eloquent more than he does. And so I always love to read his stuff because it's like a beautifully written article about things happening in the world, but every single word is individually selected. So if you're into words, you might like that. But I'm the same way. It is hard. Most people want you to say how to get rich, not the nuance of what it means to have financial freedom, right? It's
or
like
level. How just to be free and have the money to do that.
Yeah. Or to use a better word than free. So I think you're right. And I think in our world of where you have to get attention by means of subject line and headline and hook.
Yeah, which is huge pain in the ass.
It's very clickbaity. But then in a book, I imagine you get to have a bit more fun between the pages. The cover might be the clickbait.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's not really like that. So tell me about the Contrarian. It's right behind your head.
Oh yeah. This is a minor branding. Contrarian thinking for me started as a little labor of love. It was in 2010 when the world was going crazy for the first time. And I realized that people weren't actually communicating with each other. And I thought it was pretty crazy as a former journalist. I was a journalist before I was in finance, that we weren't allowed to question things. And I'm not talking one side of the aisle. I'm just saying, well, like, why can't we have conversations where we debate things without saying that because you disagree with me, you categorically are a bad human? You could just have a different opinion on something that I don't agree with. And so I started Contrarian thinking with this idea of let's have a conversation via email format because we can't see each other in person anymore. And I'd like us to go back and forth. So it started with a bunch of like, kind of well-known friends that like, probably if I said people on the internet would know who they were. And then it became, and then they started forwarding it to people. And then I started forwarding it to people and realizing, hey, I actually want to grow this thing. And it started with this idea of we need to think critically and we need to be contrarians in the fact that we should question everything we hear from me, from you, from everybody. If we're not questioning things, then we're going to accept these narratives that often are based on, false logic or incomplete facts and figures, or at the worst case, actual misguidance. And what I realized quickly is nobody really cares about critical thinking. Like everybody thinks they are a critical thinker, but what people do care about is money. So if you get to like a base need, like, greed or health or love, that's like a base need that we need as a human. And so I kind of use money as a Trojan horse in contrarian thinking to get people to think critically and to get people into a position of ownership, because I think then when you're not involved in this layer of scarcity, you might be able to actually think critically for yourself. And maybe I can Trojan horse it in.
Yeah. So why do you think that way?
Why do I think that people cannot think critically unless they have
I want to
ownership?
ask that question. Yes.
Yeah, a couple different reasons. One, I don't think humans operate well from a position of fear. I mean, there's lots of data that supports that our brain, when they're in a state of fight or flight, can't do complex thinking. We can't actually string together rational thought very well. We have to do, rapid movements. And typically those are an over-exaggeration, which is why you would run or you would tense up and fight, and your adrenaline would push you forward into a state that's not thoughtful and critical. And so I think in the society today, most people are operating from a fight or flight mentality every single day. And if instead we could get more people into a state in which they have some personal protection, like I don't worry that much about what's happening with politics, because candidly, I could put money behind local politicians in my community to make a real difference. I could move, which I have if I don't like the politics of somewhere. If, I got fired from something, it wouldn't be that big of a deal because I have additional resources. And so optionality to me comes with a decreased adrenal state, meaning I'm less stressed. And I think most people are not operating from that because most people are, 30 days away from not having enough money if they lose their job. Nobody has reserves. And I can, at least because I know finance, I could maybe handle that. I don't know enough about health to handle the obesity crisis, or I don't know enough about mental health to handle sort of the opiate crisis or this, sort of states of depression that we have as a society. But like maybe I could handle or help on the edges with something in this money state.
So what do you do in that particular fashion? Like, how do you help people? I know that your idea is to buy small businesses. Like, I'm trying to understand how you take there's a financial crisis in the country, but at the same time you can actually help people figure out what to do next for their own situation.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how you do that, because I'm a human being also, and I want to know how to get it done.
Yeah. Well, so we do a couple different things. I mean, one word that I think is a little oversimplified is financial education, but the idea is most people tell you about like, how to start a savings account, or, how to get out of debt. Really important things. I think there's enough information out on the internet on those two things, and those are incremental. You can't make big leaps typically when you make a small salary and you're saving a lot, or when you have a big chunk of debt, but you have a small salary and you need to work it off. And so they can like Susie Orman their way to, a change in that situation, or Dave Ramsey, like, great. Those two talk about it. What I talk about more is most people don't understand the language of real money. And the language of real money is all in financial terms and structuring. Like if you actually want to change your life, I don't think you do it by saving in the short term. How could you do it instead? You could do it by negotiating the way that you earn right now completely differently. You could align your incentives so that the way that you make money when the company makes money, you make money. And if your current company won't allow you to do that, you go somewhere else to do it. So we teach stuff called like negotiation through revenue share or profit sharing. So that's one particular way. And then we teach about how to become an owner in a business that you work in. So right now, for instance, we have millions of baby boomers retiring all around the country in this next 10-year period. And with them come all of these small businesses. Well, in every small business is a series of employees. And those employees should probably be some of the people that take over these businesses, but typically they don't. So we want to teach those employees, how do you negotiate to own the company you work for? How do you use things like seller financing to take over the company overall? How do you negotiate for one of your competitors' companies? And how could you do that without a ton of capital yourself? You don't have maybe millions to throw around, but you could use these financial tools that the big private equity guys use that we could take down to everyday normal humans who could, like, once people learn this, once people learn what, like, I could negotiate not just for like a 1% pay raise or an extra week of vacation, but I could negotiate by completely changing the way my compensation is handled, or I could negotiate to own the business that I work for or own somebody else's business, and I could use other people's money to do it. Then like their brain kind of breaks for a second, because you realize, oh man, the way they taught me to get financially free through the stock market and through savings and through budgeting and through, getting rid of debt it works over time, but there's a much more efficient way to do it. And it's to model after what private equity does.
Yeah. And so how did you learn that yourself?
Yeah. I made all the same mistakes that everybody made. When I started to learn in private equity how to put together deals, and, I've done hundreds and hundreds of deals now, I originally started just like any employee would. So I was, putting deals together, doing pitch decks. How do I look at this P&L statement? What about these finances? What does that mean? How can we structure this deal? Could we get enough leverage over here? Like, what covenants could we put on it? It was just normal PE 101, but I never actually thought I could do it by myself. I thought, I got to work in one of these firms for 70 hours a week until eventually I could become a partner. And then I guess I could maybe get some percentage of the overall business. And then eventually I just got too frustrated with actually a couple partners at the firm, where I was like, you know what? I just put together $100 million deal for these guys. They're going to make like $30 to $40 million on this. I'm going to make, I don't know, 600K or something. That's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong. But I did all the work on this deal. I found it. I did all the analysis. I closed a bunch of it. Why do they have so much more than I have? And I was like, because they have skin in the game. They're taking all the risk. And this is their company. I'm playing with their chips. So if you're playing with somebody else's chips, you're never going to make it. And so I just realized, well, I don't feel comfortable doing a $100 million deal by myself, but maybe I could start with some smaller deals. I'll use my own money for it, and I'll see if this same exact process works. And it did, like a little bit different of a process, but maybe a simplified down version of it works for me to buy small businesses and then do the same thing the big guys are doing.
What deals do you have right now that you're excited about?
Yeah, it's a really good, I was talking about this last night. Well, I have one. So the most interesting deals to me right now are a little bit more like 202 or 303 level deals, which would not be what I'd recommend when you first start doing this. Just a caveat if anybody's listening, but the ones I'm interested in.
Some people are actually listening.
So the one that I like right now is, I think that these, let's call it 13 million small businesses in the U.S. that are turning over hands from the baby boomer generation to whoever is next.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal, right?
Huge deal. I mean, we're talking about, in my opinion, the greatest wealth transfer since, maybe the Industrial Revolution first came online. 100
years later, and it's happening again. Yeah,
I think so. And more decentralized, because, the last wealth transfer like this was really during the internet age, right? But it wasn't transferred from somewhere else. It was created from new technology. This is
it was also created from new money.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And so, this is actually an instance in which there's just a natural evolution from one person holding the torch to the next. And so in my mind, what I think will happen because of that is, historically, so many of these small businesses, they didn't have technology wrapped around them. I can't tell you how often I buy a business and they use fax machines and the website's awful and they don't use any text, and, they have no marketing, they have no SEO. They would never dream of adding a newsletter to their business. And that's because it was a different generation. My generation, the one before, has grown up differently.
How does that work? Do you buy the business and you upgrade?
That's exactly right. we add tech to them. And so the businesses that I'm interested in buying right now aren't just those old businesses that need the tech. It's I want to buy the tech that's going to apply to 50 businesses, and then I don't have to buy all 50 of them. I just get to take the tech and apply them to a bunch. So like laundromat software for wash and fold is one of the deals that we're looking at. Software for the car wash industry. Before, that probably wouldn't have worked because those owners wouldn't have been open to it. Now the next generation is taking over. Those businesses are going to be super interesting.
You're interested also in like the macro perspective of like entrepreneurship in general.
Yeah.
Like,
definitely.
where does that come from? Why do you care about it?
I find it fascinating. I think there's something to this idea of a scoreboard that happens with entrepreneurship that reminds me of sports. You know, you can just go scoreboard. Am I winning or losing? Scoreboard. Am I getting better? And it's the same thing with the game of entrepreneurship. It's like you start with a tiny kernel of an idea. You get beaten down by everybody telling you no a bunch until finally you either get to look at the scoreboard and say, like I have a revenue producing profitable business that's now growing and has real value to it, or you don't. And so at a certain point, it's just a game. It's a game that I find really fascinating. And it's sort of like the gym. It's a bit of an addiction. Now that I like to go to the gym all the time, if I get a day where I don't go to the gym, I don't feel so great. And it's sort of the same with doing business. I love the game of business. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I think it's because it's got that natural progression of scoreboarding that keeps your mind fresh. And so I suppose, you know, people say to me, gosh, Codie, you know, cannabis investing sounds more fun than owning laundromats, right? And to me, it's the exact same thing. It's like widget 1, widget 2. The real fun part is actually how do you structure the deal? How do you get employees to get engaged? How do you sell the thing eventually? And so I don't really care what the underlying business is, as long as I think there's a beneficial component for society and it's like something I'd be okay written on my tombstone. But besides that, it's just a game, and I like the game.
Do you care about money?
Oh yeah, for sure. I
Why?
think money's another scoreboard.
Can you explain that?
So I wouldn't say that we live a lavish lifestyle. I mean, if you saw my husband and I, like, you know, we have plenty of money now for what we need. But the part about money I find interesting is it's really just a tool. And so when I think about architecting the life I want, I like to think about it like a house. So like, what would I need to construct a house? I'd have to have a bunch of tools to go together. I'd have to build a team around it. And money is the same thing. It allows you to be the architect of your life. And then depending on how much you have, it allows you to architect much broader things. So you could architect your friend group or your neighborhood or your community or maybe cities or maybe beyond. And so money to me is the difference between why Codie Sanchez, with the last name like Sanchez, has had a different life than another Sanchez right on the other edge of the border that I met when I was, doing human trafficking reporting as a journalist. The only real difference between the two of us was socioeconomics. I had more power because I had more money, which meant that less bad things happened to me than to this person. And the consequences.
How do you think about the other person in that context?
I think
like money matters in some way, but nobody really knows how.
Yeah. I mean, I think we know how in the same way that we know that it hurts if somebody hits our knee with a hammer, right? So I'm not an absolutist or a relativist. In my mind, it's money matters because it allows you to buy more freedom. It allows you to buy less pain in your life, and not categorically, not all the time, but on average, right? At the end of the day,
but why is that?
Money you have,
I want to ask.
or optionality you have.
Yeah, why is that a difficult concept for? Like we mostly talk about politics in the media, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is it difficult for people to understand that we just want to be able to be free and be productive and live our own lives and contribute whatever we can to society or whatever? I think society is a bad tool.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Like, why can't we just live free lives?
Well, I think a couple different reasons. The thing about us humans is once we accumulate power, we don't like to give it back. And so that's why I typically like small businesses. I like small businesses because there's lots of them. They're totally decentralized. It's much harder to accumulate power inside of them. Same with government. I like decentralized government, much harder to accumulate power. So one of the reasons why I think we have the issues that we have in general is there's this fine balance all the time between efficiency, which is more centralization or scaling, and overuse or overexertion of power. And those two things are like a teeter-totter all the time, sort of fighting against one another. And in society today, on the average, people believe often that if they are in charge of something, then it will be better. I understand how to help this person. I can fix this. We can fix this if we just get our hands around it and have the power to fix it. And by and large, I don't believe that's true. I think a lot of things in life, it's better if we allow the individual to handle them. Not everything. I mean, coordinated roads are nice. I like having a coordinated plumbing system. Like there's huge benefits to it. But I think that's the issue, is that it's this teeter-totter. Everybody's always trying to have more power. And once they have it, they don't want to give it back, even when they realize the efficiency isn't actually there for it to be in the hands of the few. But I think if you went around America and asked them, like, do you like people telling you what to do frequently? By and large, they're going to say no, but then they will give up some of their ability to say no to things without consciously thinking of it.
And how does that play into your idea of investing in small business? Like, how do you like I know what your philosophy is, but then you got to act.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it like this, from this perspective, and we saw this during COVID, but how much harder is it for the government to collect taxes from the Fortune 500 versus 300,000 small businesses, or 3 million small businesses? It's much easier actually for government to have few centralized institutions so that they can gather taxes more easily, let's say, or assess regulations more easily. There's like only a few people that are responsible. And so it's much easier to come down on them. I like small businesses because they're massively decentralized, which is really good for things like, reasonable taxation. It's really good for things like supply chain. So if it is true that construction stores and grocery stores on about a 25% of all cases are centralized, and then we have a supply chain issue at, let's say, Home Depot, or more scarily at grocery stores across the country, where we can't get food out for XYZ reason at this one grouping of stores, we actually have a pretty bad failure point. And so small businesses sort of solve that issue. And so I think the more and more we can get people to invest in those small businesses and buy those small businesses, we actually have a healthier society. And for a lot of time, I thought, well, it's just really easy. Tell people to spend their money with small businesses and we solve this, right? It's like, just go local, don't buy global, blah, blah, blah. Problem is, humans do what's easiest for them. Typically, we act in our own best interests. And so we could say that we shop local, but it turns out we don't, because everything's so much easier when we go big. And so instead of that, we have to find a solution for having diversified businesses in our economy that is aligned with human self-interest. And human self-interest is interested in ownership and owning your own small businesses and investing in them because there's a monetary component that makes sense for them back. And so that's why I think it works.
Yeah. So how then do you invest in small businesses? Like, what's your plan if you're interested in like a grocery store or something?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we have sort of a 10-step process that I followed from my PE days. So basically, what we do when we invest in small businesses is you basically, first you have to learn sort of how to invest in small businesses. So at Unconventional Acquisitions, one of my companies, we teach people, how do you do M&A? How do you buy small businesses? And they go through this 10-step framework. So one way that I'm getting people to invest in small businesses is we have 2,000 people that have run through that course. And we have about 250 people that have bought small businesses over the last year and a half that have self-reported to us from that. Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're approaching $50 million in profits made from those acquisitions. So that's cool. And then the way that I do it is, it's not really that dissimilar to investing in stocks or real estate. It's that you decide that you have a pool of capital. So let's say you have 10K that you want to invest in small businesses. First, you've got to figure out about this opportunity we're talking about. So like, I thought I could only put it into stocks or real estate. Maybe there's a third option. All right. Well, let's say that you're a real estate agent. So I'm a real estate agent. I want to invest in businesses that use some of those skills. So you might say, well, maybe I could buy a mortgage company, or maybe I could buy a property management company. And you start going around to your personal network and saying, hey, I buy businesses. I'm looking to buy businesses that fit in this kind of, I call it your deal box. So businesses that are under $1 million in revenue, located in Atlanta, Georgia, in the property management space, that have been around for at least 3 years. Okay, great. If you know anybody that's selling that type of business, I'd love to meet them, or that runs that type of business. And then you just do a search for, are the other businesses like this that I can buy in my area? And there's I think we teach 27 different ways that you can go about this search. But the idea is, first you have to kind of figure out what type of business you want to buy. And then you start talking about it constantly until you get a pretty good pipeline of deals. And then it gets into, how do you actually buy a small business? And you hope to execute on a few a year. And that's what we do. We now own 24 businesses like that. We've sold a few. We've bought a few more. So we always vacillate somewhere around 15 to 40.
So how does the revenue stream work at that point? Like,
so
you buy the business and then you own it, and then you reorganize and you do what?
Well, when I tell people to buy businesses for the first time, I try to tell them to keep it simple. So most people want to go and buy a turnaround business. They want to buy a shitty business that's not doing so well right now. And I pretty much say to them, imagine the first time that you go to buy a house, you buy a fixer upper. How many times does that house come through under budget and on time? Yeah, it doesn't. And so I tell people, you're not even trying to reorganize these businesses. You're trying to buy an accounting practice because you're an accountant that's located near you. You're going to take over the ownership of that business. You might work inside of it as an accountant too. And for the first 90 days, you're really just going to run the business as normal. You bought it profitably, so it's rolling right along. And you're going to take the ownership percentage, or the SD, the seller's discretionary earnings, from the business, and that's going to go in your pocket, just like a salary would, but it's an owner's distribution. And then as the business stabilizes and you figure out what happens post takeover, you can work to try to grow it and optimize it. But for the most part, I'm think about buying these businesses like bonds to start. You don't buy a bond and then say, I'm really speculating on this guy to shoot up, right? You're like, I'm going to clip the coupon. I'm going to take the percentage on a monthly or quarterly basis. And I'm going to put it in my pocket, and the bond's going to keep motoring. And that's how I want people to do it for their first deal. You're not trying to recreate the wheel.
So what happens right then? You clip the coupon and you get the money. You're talking about doing it serially.
Oh, right. For myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So mine is a little different because I have a bigger portfolio now. So our companies do about $50 million in revenue. So when we take over a business, it comes with an operator. So, I'm not going to go buy another business and run it myself at this stage. Right. What I am going to do is, let's say that we're going to buy, we're going to buy a series of car washes, right? We're going to buy out a grouping in Dallas. When we take over that business, I have an operator that's already online for that business. So I would say, all right, I found this deal. I figured out how I want to structure it. I'm going to finance the deal, and I'm going to choose you to come in here into this business, and you're going to run it for me. And then you're going to report all of that information out to my CFO. And my CFO on a weekly basis is going to listen to you, see if you need more money, less money. Are you on target, off target? And then I'm going to probably meet with you on a monthly or quarterly basis. And so that's typically how I operate businesses. It's a holdco structure. So we have a few of them, but I have layers in between me, because now I do a lot of stuff in media and other businesses where I'm actively involved. When I buy a business, I'm not actively involved in the day-to-day, just in structuring the deal in the beginning.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get involved with something like a deal that you're putting together, how would they do that? Do you want that?
Yeah, no, at this point, we don't take third-party capital. So it's all my own money, or maybe I'll have a partner or two in it, depending on how big the deal is. And the reason is because, if it's a good deal, I actually want to take down the whole deal. At this stage in my career, I don't take third-party capital. I did for a number of years. Maybe would do it again. I'm not sure if I want to raise another private equity fund. Right now, I'm pretty happy with where we're at. And so, at some point, if you're good enough and you understand how to get leverage, you want to take as much of the equity as you can. And that could change at some point, but right now, probably not. So the only way they can get involved with deals with me is like, say somebody, so in our mastermind group for unconventional acquisitions, for instance, I love when people bring deals to me like, hey, I want to buy this business and do X and Y and Z. What do you think? And then each week we get on a phone call and we analyze the deals like, I would be worried about this, ask them about that, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times they'll bring a deal that's actually pretty good and they're going to run it and operate it, but they need additional capital. So I might fund their deals. And that we do.
Yeah. So that means that most of the people that come to you just need the capital to make it happen. And they have a good idea and you're going to decide whether you agree or don't.
Yeah, it sort of depends. In our mastermind, we have some people that wouldn't even let me wouldn't even give me an allocation, right? So there's some guys in there that are, there's a guy, Robert, who just sold his last business for 20 million bucks. And a couple of them before that, he just bought another business for 5 mil. Another guy just bought one for 8 million. So a lot of these guys don't need the capital. What they need is a group of people who just can help them look at the deal structure in a way that, when you're in a private equity fund, you actually usually have multiple other partners and analysts all helping you analyze every deal. So it's like, oh, I hate that structure. Why would we do it that way? You get together and you debate the merits of every deal. When you're buying businesses by yourself, it's a little scary because nobody talks about this. It's not like, hey, Sally, let's go grab lunch and talk about buying a business.
Yeah.
So we get together and analyze.
Let's say you and I were going to go grab lunch. What's your best deal? What are you looking for?
Well, if it's going to be a deal for me, there's a couple parameters that are really important. So everybody's got their deal box, right? And that's one of the first things I tell people is they'll say what's the best business we should invest in, Codie? And I'm like, I have no idea. I don't know you. The right question is, what is the best business for you based on all the things you know about yourself? And so for me and my deal box, some of the best deals for me right now are actually in the media space. I want to buy, I haven't been as good about buying these. I buy mostly
in my group also.
Oh, I bet you guys do a ton of that, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really, I've bought and sold 3 or 4 small newsletters. But I haven't done that much in the media space. I don't know why. I guess it was not my background. But those are the deals that I want. I want to figure out how to buy, other newsletters that have X million or X thousands or hundreds of thousands in subscribers. I want to consolidate them. I want to buy out the rights to, license content from other providers and incorporate them. I might want to buy some products. So in the media space, I think those would be interesting deals because I don't find those myself. And then the rest of the deals, it just comes down to, what's the cash on cash return? What's the IRR? Because if I'm going to invest in a boring business, it's probably not accretive or, additionally valuable to my portfolio right now. So it's just numbers, does it make me at least 6 figures a year in revenue? Am I getting at least a 20-25% IRR per year? Those are the things. And, do I believe in the operator? Do I believe in the business model? Is it a big enough deal? I don't want to just be allocating 10K to deals right now, which is a very lucky position I'm in. But those are the things I care about. But it depends between the two, Yeah.
And how do you make those, how do you make those decisions? What do you care about?
Yeah. I mean,
it sounds like you care about money.
Yeah. Well, money and time, right? So I think you do deals.
That's all it comes down to, right?
Yeah. You do deals. One, I don't want to do anything that's going to have any quiver of liability for us. Certainly. I don't want to do anything that is that I don't feel is a net positive for the world in some way. There's plenty of things I don't invest in because I don't think that they are actually net positive. But for the most part, what I care about now is, does it cost me time? If it does cost me time, that might be okay if I feel it's really valuable and it compounds. And does it drive enough revenue to build the other things that I want to build? Because I've never raised capital for any of my companies. And so I need every deal I do to be cash flow positive day one, essentially, because that's how we fund everything else that we build.
How passionate are you about each deal?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm a bit of a deal junkie, so I'm not passionate about every deal.
I could see that.
I'm not passionate about every deal, but I'm passionate about getting the deal done. In fact, it's a huge weakness. The weakness is that I really like the finding and the closing of deals. I don't really like the oversight and the management of deals. I sort of like the beginning and the end. So when we buy it and if we sell it, I think those parts are really interesting. And then in between, I like to work with the operator on like cool ideas to optimize it. But, you know, I die a slow death managing the same company for 10 years. That's not really my personality type. But I wish it was, though, because that's sometimes the most profitable thing you could do. I come in for like the worst, hardest
you're
parts.
not like that. You
Yeah.
are definitely not like that.
And it's a bummer. If I could only do that. I mean, lots of people are like, why don't you just have one business and really focus on it? I'm like, because it just doesn't seem like it's much fun, honestly.
All right, cool. All right, Codie, it's really a pleasure to
Right back at you.
meet you and talk to you. So
Well, thank you for
I'm
having
gonna
me.
close this one, but I think we're gonna talk again. I feel
I'd
like
love that. Yeah, totally. I want to pick your brain on these media buyouts. I need to learn more about that.
media it's in flux right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like it. Yeah. I was just talking to two of my friends that are doing pretty big layoffs at media companies this week.
Yeah, it's getting nasty, but it's also an opportunity, just like you said.
Yeah. Wait, one question for you. Were you in media like during 2007, 2008? I guess would have
Yes.
been the last recession
Yeah.
you were in. Like, how do you think financial media companies will perform during the next recession, and who will win and who will lose and why?
I'm not gonna I'm not gonna pick a winner or loser because I
Yeah,
think
or just
that
like types, you know, like if they're like
I
this,
think
they'll lose.
the people that figure out social media
Yeah,
are gonna win.
interesting.
But I don't think there is an answer at the moment
Interesting.
because like there's a lot of shit going on with Twitter and Meta is a disaster.
Yeah,
So like the area that we play in is not answered yet.
interesting. Yeah,
And in my own company, they've been trying to develop their own platform and stuff, and that hasn't worked either.
interesting.
So we're kind of stuck in a way.
Interesting. So do you anticipate that media companies will have a pull down during this recession, like financial media companies, or do you anticipate you just change the messaging and then they grow? It's something we're grappling with. Like, how do I do projections for the next 2 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in two ways. One is I don't think there's going to be a recession. And then the second one is that media companies will anticipate. And so like you can like if I as a publisher want to lean into it, that's what we want to do. Like figure out how to communicate better with subscribers.
Yeah.
That's what I want to
do?
do.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have to change your messaging quite a bit if there is a down market? Like, does it become more fear-based as opposed to greed-based? Is that an old adage?
Yeah, I mean that kind of sucks, but you have to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't actually think that there's going to be that much change.
And why do you think there won't be a recession?
I think I'm just reading the tea leaves with the midterms and all that. Like I don't think that we're that bad off.
Interesting.
Like from a marketing perspective, I could be as negative as I wanted to be and like sell that idea, but I'm not there. I don't believe it.
Interesting. Well, that's fascinating. That's really helpful. Thanks for giving me your insight.
I don't know. I don't know if it's useful.
I think it is. I got to get more data points on it. So right now, that's all really useful for me.
I just think we're not going there yet.
Yeah.
It's weird because I'm writing a book or updating a book called Demise of the Dollar.
Oh, geez.
And I'm writing about fiat currencies and the history of like central banks trying to encourage economic upturns and downturns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just weird for me to think that we're not going to go into a recession. I just don't think we're going to.
Interesting. What
Yeah.
do you think the dollar's going away? Is that a literal translation to the definition?
Yeah, I think it's going away, but we don't know what the shape it's going to take.
Yeah.
Like if they do a central bank digital currency, that's going to be really bad.
Oh, I agree. That scares the hell out of me. Nothing scares me more than that, and like some version of like a social credit system.
Yeah,
Can't think of anything
which
worse.
could equally happen.
Yeah.
Both of
Yeah.
those things could happen. But if
Yeah.
we're vocal enough, maybe neither will happen.
Yeah. Well, if I thought it was interesting. I went to this event the other day, and if you think about it, we kind of already have a social credit score. Like, for instance, I had no idea that there's a population of like 13 million prime age males that are unemployed in the US, and that 65% of felons, which are usually prime age males in the US, never work again. And I was just thinking, that's so fascinating. So like, we've assigned this credit score to anybody who's had a felony, which even could just be like cannabis usage too much in California, for instance. And now because of that credit score, they basically can never work again. And so in a way,
that's kind of what I'm grappling with
yeah,
is if they can't work again, what are they going to do? Like we have
exactly.
this guy that comes around and he's like super nice. He's probably got some habit of his own.
Yeah.
But he does good work and we pay him and it's all cash. And if there was if there's some kind of central bank digital currency, we wouldn't be able to pay him anymore.
Oh yeah, that's a
That would
great point.
actually destroy that guy's life. And
That's fascinating.
he comes by, he takes care of all these houses
Yeah.
and he does it, we give him 20, 25 bucks at a time or whatever, but he's able to live. He supports his mom.
Yeah.
Like they can actually function.
It's a really good point. Yeah, no, I think it's horrifying. I mean, I'm completely against it. I think some of those things, like your hat says, like S-L-O-K-S, like I'm like, where are the battle lines? What are the fights that you have, and like, what do you do about it? But I do think a central bank currency would be horrific. A social credit system would be horrific. I was at an event last night where they were talking about something called Sky-Fi. That's they can now, with like, I'm going to mess up the word because they're much smarter than I am, but with this like hyper spectrum laser, they can basically do satellite real-time imagery all the way down to like see if something is a Coke can on the ground from the lower Earth orbit. And I'm like, well, what happens with like cloud cover? Could you like, nope, see right through that. And so it's all through like radio frequency waves, I guess. No. And so if you think about where the world's going, that centralization is actually kind of scary.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, I just so enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
I'd love to
stay in touch.
at some point. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
That sounds like
I
a plan.
like this whole program that I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, great. Well, I'm happy to always chat about anything. I like to have other friends that are in this weird world we're in and us to cross-pollinate ideas. So I'll shoot you, I think you have my email, but I'll shoot you my number too, and we can always text and take it offline if you ever want to.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, man. Well, it was so nice to meet you, Addison. Thanks again for doing this.
See it. Bye.